Jane Eyre. Poor Jane. In one morning, she's gone from being Mr. Rochester's blushing bride to a dejected, solitary woman once again. The truth is out. Mr. Rochester is already married to a woman named Bertha Mason. She's the maniac who set fire to Mr. Rochester's bedroom, viciously attacked her own brother, and tore up Jane's veil the night before the wedding. Now the wedding has been called off, and Bertha's back in her cell in the third story. Could it be any worse? Jane wakes at sunset and re-enters her living nightmare. She knows she must leave Thornfield, but she can't bear the thought of leaving Mr. Rochester. She gets up and finds him sitting outside her chamber door. He begs her for forgiveness, but Jane is too weak to say much. She hasn't eaten or drunk anything the whole day. So Mr. Rochester carries her downstairs to the library where she can get warm and have refreshment. But when Mr. Rochester tries to kiss Jane, she turns away. This upsets him, although he knows that Jane has an unwavering sense of right and wrong. He's a married man. Then again, Mr. Rochester doesn't consider himself truly married to Bertha Mason, that murderous demon, so he declares that he and Jane will quit Thornfield Hall and find somewhere to quietly live together. But Jane isn't having it. She'll be no man's mistress. Hey team, just a reminder, if you like this video, please hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. It really helps the channel out, and our next upload could be on something taught in your next class. Thanks, and back to the video. Now Mr. Rochester becomes wild-eyed and threatening, but Jane can handle him. She takes his hand and tells him to sit down and talk it out. However, the tears she'd been holding back now gush from her eyes. He tries to embrace her again, but she pulls away. She tells him she loves him, but that she must leave him forever. Now he becomes frantic. He's losing her, and he's panicking. In an attempt to reason with Jane, Mr. Rochester explains his wretched circumstances. He tells her the whole story: his miserable arranged marriage to Bertha, her madness and confinement, his decade-long escape to Europe, and his various short-term mistresses. By the time Mr. Rochester returned to Thornfield last January, he was a depressed and bitter man. He certainly wasn't expecting to meet the love of his life sitting in a frosty laneway by herself, but he did, and now here they are, two souls entwined. Mr. Rochester admits he was wrong to deceive her. He should have been honest about Bertha. But it's all in the open now. Will Jane accept his promise of faithful and undying love? With a tortured heart, she refuses him again. Mr. Rochester embraces her, kisses her, pleads with her, but the answer is still no. Jane will obey God's law, not Edward Rochester's. He strides across the room and seizes her forcefully, but she meets his eye with courage and resolve. It's over. Before Jane leaves, she offers him a tender farewell and gives him one last kiss on the cheek. Then she's gone. That night, Jane's mother comes to her in a dream and warns her to avoid temptation. So she rises before dawn, packs a few things, grabs a snack, and leaves Thornfield. As she trudges down an unfamiliar road, Jane hates herself for the pain she'll cause by her sudden departure. The agony of it weakens her and she stops to rest. When a coach approaches, she hails it. Jane pays the driver all the money she has left, which is enough to be taken far away from Thornfield Hall. The coach drops her off at a crossroads, and the nearest town is 10 miles away. Jane has also left her parcel of things in the carriage, so now she is truly destitute. Wild, wind-swept moorlands and mountains stretch to the horizon. Rather than selecting a road to follow, Jane heads into the wilderness. When she finds a rock shelter, she settles there for the night. The next day, Jane heads back to the crossroads and walks to the nearest village. By the time she arrives, she's starving, but too embarrassed to ask for food in exchange for her scarf or gloves. Instead, she asks around for employment, but no one helps her. So, Jane wanders around like a lost dog until she retreats to the woods to sleep. Not only is it cold and unsafe, but it also starts to rain. The rain continues the following day, and Jane is reduced to a sodden, starving beggar. She leaves the village at sunset and follows a narrow pathway through rugged fields. Weakened by acute hunger and sorrow, Jane doubts she'll make it through the night. She desperately prays for safety and direction, which is soon answered. A dim light shines on the horizon, and Jane drags her exhausted limbs towards it. Thank goodness, it's a house. Jane enters the gate and looks through a little window where the light shone. Inside is a pretty scene. A servant knits while two elegant young ladies read together by the fire. As they chat, Jane learns their names. Hannah is the servant, and the two young ladies are Diana and Mary. They're also waiting for a man named St. John to return home, and their father died 2 weeks ago. Jane knocks on the door, hoping to speak with the young ladies. But Hannah answers the door and immediately distrusts her. She hands her a penny and sends her away. With this rejection, Jane sinks on the doorstep and waits to die. But God has other plans because St. John has just arrived and seen the whole exchange. He brings Jane inside to find out what her story is. They give her a seat by the fire, along with some bread and milk. Naturally, they ask numerous questions, but Jane is too weak and sickly to say much other than her new alias, Jane Elliot. Thankfully, they are good people, and Jane is escorted up to a dry, warm bed. Over the next few days, Jane doesn't move or speak, but she does hear people coming in and out of the room. Hannah, the servant, seems put off that Jane is there. But Diana and Mary say kind, compassionate things. St. John is stern but curious about Jane. On the 4th day, Jane rises out of bed and sees that her clothes have been cleaned and pressed. Even her shoes and stockings are clean. As she gets dressed, she realises how much weight she's lost, but at least now she doesn't look like a drowned rat. When she enters the kitchen, Hannah even smiles at her. Jane sits by the fire and fields some rather abrupt questions from Hannah. Has she begged before? Has she no house or money? Is she educated? Jane makes it very clear that while she has no money, she's well educated and definitely not a beggar. Jane also learns that the house is called Marsh End, or Moor House, and is the ancestral home of the Rivers family. Hannah has served there for 30 years and raised the 3 Rivers siblings, St. John, Diana and Mary. St. John is the parson of the nearby village of Morton, where Jane recently spent 2 miserable days. He doesn't usually live at Marsh End, nor do Diana or Mary, as they are governesses, like Jane. The 3 of them have only returned home to mourn their father's death. Their mother died many years ago. Eventually, Hannah admits her mistake of turning Jane away, and they shake hands. When the 3 siblings return from their walk, Diana insists that Jane sit with them in the parlour. They're all curious about Jane, so she opens up, to a point. She explains that she's a friendless 18-year-old orphan with nowhere to turn. When St. John asks if Jane has ever been married, tears spring to her eyes. Jane refuses to say where she has just come from and with whom she lived. It is her secret to keep. However, she reveals that she spent 6 years at Lowood School, first as a pupil, then as a teacher. For the past year, she's worked as a private governess, but that ended in catastrophe. End of story. But since St. John is a perceptive man, Jane admits that Jane Elliot isn't her real name. She's using it to conceal herself for very good reasons. They respect Jane for her honesty and respect her privacy. The sisters are especially welcoming and promise her a place at Marsh End for as long as she needs it. In the meantime, St. John will find suitable work for her. Weeks pass, and Jane finds kindred spirits in the Rivers sisters. They each share a deep love for nature, reading, and art. It's as if they're long-lost family. However, St. John is more reserved and difficult to read. He's also frequently out of the house, owing to his clergyman duties in Morton. He also seems more restless than his sisters, like he's disappointed with his lot in life. The sermons he delivers in church certainly aren't happy or uplifting. Speaking of disappointment, Jane continues to yearn for Thornfield and Mr. Rochester. She is far from over that terrible breakup, but she stays quiet about it. The time soon comes for Diana and Mary to leave Marsh End and return to their jobs. The rich families they work for live in towns south of London, very far away. Jane wonders what will become of her now, so she goes to ask St. John if he's found work for her. The truth is, he found work for her weeks ago. The reason he didn't mention it was because his sisters enjoyed Jane's presence so much. But now they're set to return to their positions. Jane should take one up herself. However, he warns her that the work he's found for Jane is humble, very humble. St. John would like her to be the mistress of a small school for girls he plans to set up in Morton. Her yearly salary will be a modest £30, but he's already hired a 2-room building and had it comfortably furnished. All Jane needs to do is say yes and move in. Jane gladly accepts the position. In fact, she'll move into the house tomorrow and open the school next week. St. John is pleased, although he reckons that Jane won't stay long in Morton. He can see in her eyes that she has the same restless spirit as him. In fact, he intends to leave Morton within 12 months. As the day approaches for Diana and Mary to depart, they become melancholy. Considering St. John's plan to quit Morton, this could well be their last goodbye. To add to their distress, they receive news that their Uncle John has died and left them only a teeny-tiny portion of his massive fortune. Apparently, some obscure relative is set to inherit the bulk of the money instead. £20,000, the lucky so-and-so. Oh well, the Rivers siblings will just have to carry on as usual. Then again, all that money would have made such a wonderful difference in their lives. Best to drop the subject. Within a week, Marsh End is abandoned and shut up. Jane takes up her position as schoolmistress in Morton. Diana and Mary travel to their distant posts, and St. John and Hannah move to the parsonage in Morton. Will this be a positive, fresh start for Jane Eyre? Elliot? We hope you enjoyed this Schooling Online production. For more easy lessons, check out our other videos.